Hello. Thanks for having me at Advertising Week Europe. I want to introduce myself. I am Michael Shaughnessy. I am the Chief Operating Officer at Kargo. For those of you that don't know Kargo, Kargo is a company that really focuses on the power of design and creative science to deliver extraordinary outcomes for the world's largest brands and working with the most premium publishers. So today we are going to be talking about the power of creative in an AI programmatic and automated world. And I thought to kick this off, we couldn't start a presentation without a little bit of ChatGPT. Yeah. So let's test ChatGPT and how I did today. So to be relevant to today's conversation, I thought, hold on, trying to get the video to load. So how should an American like me present at Advertising Week Europe? And so let's see what ChatGPT does. I think may need help from the control room. All right, we're working. And this just demonstrates AI is only as powerful as the user that is engaging with it. And also too, I could be a faster typer. So we will wait. But the reason I post this is, and one of the things that we'll discuss in this presentation is, while publishing will be disrupted, and this is something that is very personal to me based on my publishing background, it just demonstrates the power of creativity, which we'll talk about in the presentation. So how do we feel about these answers? Do we feel they're accurate? Being polite, introducing your background. I won't be giving you all hugs and kisses as it said about being polite, but I'm happy to give handshakes. And as we saw in the teaser, there will be no stereotypes. So with that, transitioning to why creative matters and to everyone in this room. And one of the things that Kargo has been doing for the last decade is really been preaching attention before it became mainstream. So some of the thought leadership studies and the way that we positioned ourselves as a thought leader is through some of the studies that we've done that have been really fixated on making sure that when a brand has a message, it resonates with its audience and it's also in the right environment. So some of those are studies like viewability and memorability. As a publisher, I remember in 2015, there was a huge movement to viewability, and now viewability is table stakes. But just because something is viewable, there can be creatives that drive brand awareness and brand recall. It's not memorable. So we've spent a lot of time in the industry and working with eye tracking vendors and third-party research to make sure that we don't get lost as to what's in a spreadsheet. And then other things that are really important when it comes to creative and delivering your message are things like feed versus read. When someone is in their local grocery store or convenience store, whatever it may be, they may be checking what's going on Insta, TikTok, Snap, but they may not be as leaned in as if they're reading something in The Guardian or The Telegraph when they have a little bit more intent. And that's why we've done studies like feed versus read and viewability versus memorability. So why does all of this matter? Each and every one of you, according to studies, see as many as 5,000 ads a day in this market. So we're bombarded with so many different messages, and each of these ads should have the opportunity to be seen. And as I mentioned earlier, viewability is table stakes, and on most accounts, 95% of campaigns are using it as a KPI. So when it comes to marketers and publishers, we need to really be focused on where people are spending their time. So in 2019, we saw that mobile was about 3.5 hours of people's time in most markets. And when you look at traditional media, when it's comparing it to TV and print, they're pretty comparable. It was the first time that mobile exceeded, but look at where we're heading in 2023. It's the first year where time spent on mobile will be nearly all of traditional media. So when it comes to where marketers and publishers are spending their energy, it's really important for us to understand how we convey our message and how we break through the clutter. And with that, when it comes to publishers and how they monetize their content, we see that the average publisher partners with as many as 20 different sell-side technology companies. Just think of that. There are 20 partners that are basically auctioning off publishers' ad inventory, which as the industry is becoming more conscious, isn't the most sustainable thing or the best when it comes to our environment. So we need to be a little bit more purpose-driven and make sure that things aren't so commoditized. And what's even more complicated, or what bloats the bid stream even more, is that more than half of this is a reseller auction. So it's really compounding the problem that exists. And this is happening for nearly 2/3 of video auctions, which is where consumers are shifting. So a few other things to just call out in this publisher reality is that there are many marketers that are working with less than stellar publishers. The reason being is, in this automated programmatic world, there are publishers that are capitalizing on metrics that are blunt, like viewability and VCR, these blunt metrics, to capitalize on budgets. And while these made-for-advertising sites check all the boxes, it's really important for us to rethink metrics that go beyond this to make sure that we are driving things like brand lift, awareness, and outcomes, especially in uncertain economic times. So what does this mean for us? If you look at today's digital reality and where people are spending their time on their phone, look at the scrolling device on the left side. This is a publisher's page. There are actually advertisements that are so small that even on this large screen, you wouldn't see it. And the reality is, on these crowded pages, something that's a one-by-one that's going through a programmatic auction where the creative isn't seen might be the right audience, it might be the right contextual environment, and while it may be viewable on a spreadsheet, it's not driving the right outcome for a marketer. And the other thing, too, that's really important to note, and why it's always good to set the stage with publishers and how people are consuming content, is that the average publisher are writing articles that are shorter than their ads.txt page. So look at that scroll. So the next time you go to your favorite publisher, look at their ads.txt page, see how many people are plugged in and compare it to the average article. And then lastly, the thing that we were so fixated on years ago and still is really true and resonates is that here there are 6 ads in this 30-second view. All of them are viewable, but many of them are not memorable. So we placed a bet that viewability alone could not guarantee effectiveness, and the data backed it up. So if you look at the metrics here, when you compare standard IEB units and you look at unaided recall, it's significantly less. When you look at aided recall for these more high-impact units, it's much higher on high-impact units, as well as brand recognition. So we believe, and I believe the industry would agree with this, that there is a difference between banners and branding. So just to demonstrate how we've been doing this for many years is that we take these standard assets, and this is a fun one, it's Heineken. I think most of us will be at the pub later. And we take these standard creative assets and we put them into these high impact formats that take up more space on the page. They are full bleed and they're animated. And they also have a canvas that brands them. And the reason we do this is to drive results. So with these types of executions, it gives the opportunity in a programmatic ecosystem to drive store visits, to drive recall, to drive aided awareness or blunt metrics like CTR, as well as things like viewability and VCR for video metrics. But the thing that's really important is that even as AI may change our workflows and may make it easier for us to do tasks like at the beginning of the presentation, it may help us when it comes to machine learning to optimize our campaigns. And many organizations in our space have been investing in large data science teams to optimize campaigns. It may also help us in the creation of creative. But the reality is we still need to make sure that even when we're using AI, it goes back to the basics. So experiences like this, where it takes over the entire page or full bleed executions, really drive success for brands. And some of them are higher favorability, consideration, as well as improved awareness. So to put this to a more branded case study, one of the things that we worked on this past year using this branded new twist on a homepage takeover is this 7th generation campaign with Unilever. To just give like high level what 7th generation was trying to do, it was to disrupt the digital experience. The thing that, as you could see in the visual on the presentation, is Similar to this conference where we're trying to not be using plastic, which is why we had to bring our personal water bottles to hydrate. But what they wanted to do and what we did for them is we basically created this high impact, creative driven experience, which then we essentially made sure it was in the right contextual environment, but also to making sure that we were doing sequential storytelling with the creative experience. And to just highlight some of the results very quickly, we saw that there was 5 times the higher awareness when you stitch your creative experience across mobile and desktop and you leave it this. We believe that the creative executions drove a 24-point lift in awareness. There was a 95% lift in the very concerned audience groups that are very invested in this purpose-driven marketing. And then some of the other more blunt metrics is that it was close to a 1% CTR. So with all of this, what does move the needle and why is creative so important? So as you are advertising in today's digital landscape, it's really important to take into consideration the share of voice. So how much space is your asset taking in the page? What is ad clutter like? And regardless if we're using AI to set up campaigns or make sure that there are the right targeting optimizations or even enable the creative generation or execution, share of voice is still really important. Other things to take into consideration to really move the needle are making sure that there are compelling animations. And these are the factors that really drive attention for the consumer because attentions are dwindling. I think that Microsoft in 2015 or so said that the average human has less attention than a goldfish. And we see that our attention spans are decreasing with each year. So it's really important that the creative is in the right places, it has the right contextual alignment, and that there's prominent and persisting branding, which drive increased attention, which result in better outcomes. So the reason why this is all really important and why the publisher story is important for everyone in this room to appreciate is that the next phase of supply path optimization isn't just about consolidating for cost cutting, it's really about value creation. And publishers have come to view their SSPs as just another disposable line item when they don't generate this incremental value. And it's one of the things that is really starting to disrupt our industry. And we even see the convergence of DSPs and SSPs where their functionalities are becoming similar and commoditized SSPs are becoming less relevant for both marketers and publishers. And what we see is as content consumption is changing and as our industry matures and there's more automation in what we do, CTV is accelerating this. If you look at the Trade Desk, they're able to activate with their product called OpenPath. And then 2 SSPs have come out recently about their products where you can bid into inventory and really disintermediate potentially the DSPs as they exist today, which include Magnite and PubMatic. And this is why the next phase of supply path optimization is value creation. But while we're dealing with this disruption, I think there's a bigger disruption, which is why creative is so compelling and why most people are here today, is that there are probably 2 factors that are going to change the way that publishers create content, but how all of us consume content. So why does this matter? So the reason this matters is that marketers really need to meet consumers where they are. And as individuals are creating content with AI, consumers are also going to be looking for answers from things like Google's Bard, which will generate less page views in the contextual environments where a lot of mobile spend is today. Another consideration is that there's a huge shift to video, and it's really creative and making sure that these best practices are used across all environments is the way that marketers will continue to have their reach, have their voice be heard, and build that brand identity. And it's why we have been so fixated on what we call art and ad tech. So the learnings that we took from mobile, which funny enough started with video. So there were many advertisers that wanted to advertise on TV and use standard linear assets. We did a lot of research to demonstrate the efficacy and how you can use the appropriate branding to take a 30-second asset, put a branded canvas around it, and bring it to a mobile environment and drive the appropriate outcomes for advertisers. So now similarly, we've been able to take the best practices of taking big ideas on small screens and bringing those to the big screen. And with some of the testing that we've done, just highlighted up here, is that when you use these enhanced experiences within CTV, it drives more than a third of people are willing to learn something new based on what they see. They're more than likely to search. And now whether that will be searching through Bard or actually going to a publisher's page, we'll see. And they're more likely to have purchase intent. So about 44% are more likely to actually purchase the product that is advertised. And so what does this mean to creativity? So creativity, and I probably have said this many, many times, but I want to reinforce it, is one of the most important elements in digital advertising. And it even goes beyond digital advertising. Like, creative is really king. And while AI is maturing and there's opportunities for some of that campaign automation, setting up briefs and making sure that we can be more efficient with our time, and helping us even with analyses, it is really, really important for us to maintain that emotional connection, which ChatGPT or Bard will not fully have. And also, too, it's how people like us are using the technology for brand building purposes. And there has to be that human touch, because as we saw in 2016, in an election that everyone was watching globally, if AI is trained the wrong way, it can have unintended consequences. So we should embrace AI, but not necessarily remove that human influence or curation. And then something else that I think is really interesting, and one of the conversations that even came up in a meeting today, is that while agencies may be tempted to use AI, there's so much that we have to learn, and there could be potentially like data breach or inputs that are used in these tools. So while it may be tempting to use one of these tools, it may actually compromise client relations. So we have to embrace AI, but also make sure that we are being strategic in our use. So creative is really key. And why is creative key? So when it comes to an omnichannel strategy and making sure that you break through the clutter, it's important to have consistent branding. So creative really helps ensure that brands are represented across all channels. And this really is important whether it's across social, the open web, making sure that you maintain that tone of voice, which is really, really important, because everyone in this room is consuming content on the open internet, within social, probably streaming as well. So it's important for creative to be that thing that is consistent across all of these platforms. Engagement. When something is an infographic or a video that enhances your storytelling, there is that opportunity for it to be more shareable, and also to really help with things like word of mouth. Personalization. Consumers, and we saw this in a telecom campaign that we did, they expect there to be personalization with creative and for creative to speak to them. And we also expect for creatives to be inclusive, which Dove and Unilever were an early adopter with their body campaign many years ago. But consumers really expect this, and personalization in creative helps it resonate more and be more effective. And then making sure that there's the adaptation to different platforms. So how does this creative, whether it be in linear where you can have a 30-second spot or 6 seconds within mobile for a video asset, how do we make sure that it translates to different audiences, as well as the specifications of a platform? Because each platform, whether it be Insta or TikTok or Snap or the open web, there are similar functionalities, but they're all unique. So creative is really that key element in an omni-channel strategy, and it's the thing that brings it all together and really makes things memorable across all platforms. And what we've seen through our research is that you want to be able to bring this high-impact creative to all environments, because the results are 2x better, and this cohesion really drives results. So there is a female fashion retailer where we found when we put more time and thought into the planning of how we disseminate creative across platforms. And while we're using machine learning to automate this retailer circular and to drive product discovery, it was the work that was done to stitch the creative experience across platforms that really drove approximately 30% increase in sales. So while there are opportunities for optimizations to occur, it was that human involvement and stepping back and using the data analysis and data science teams to do a lot of creative A/B testing that drove results. When we did this without taking into consideration the creative across all platforms, we didn't see the same results for the brand, which really enforces that a creative strategy in this automated world can really drive results. So for us, what does this mean? We want to continue to use this creative approach to drive innovation across all screens. We know that nearly 100% of individuals in the countries that we operate have access to connected TVs. It's important for us to take the learnings from the big ideas on the small screen to bring the big ideas to the big screen, and we're ready to exceed those expectations. So as you see here, when you do some of these like minor enhancements, even in sound-on environments, it drives better purchase intent, so people actually buy the product. Individuals will learn something new, and then also too, it's more memorable and it's more enjoyable to the consumer. So that's why we as an industry and what we do at Kargo is kind of always testing and making sure that these experiences are brand approved. So this is an example of a branded canvas, which is optimized for brand awareness. This is a split card, which helps for consideration and discoverability from the testing we've done and campaigns. Interactivity, our interactive unit, which really encourages engagement. And then this is basically just the standard 15 or 30, which isn't as excited as the other three to the left, but still is important in what we do. So the reason we've been spending a lot of time here is because consumers are consuming video, whether it's on social platforms or within streaming devices or even within the open web. And video really leads to more attention. And so one of the vendors that I think has done an incredible job in this market, as well as in the US and our APAC market, is Adelaide. And by partnering with Adelaide, we saw that video assets compared to display actually drove more attention. So even by using outstream formats within traditional online mediums, we saw this improvement. So this is what really drove inspiration for us, is that we want to reimagine the formats for CTV, for the big screen. And we want to take the learnings that we had from studies like Captivate versus Aggravate, where we spent a lot of time focusing on what are things that could be highly immersive without annoying the consumer. And we think that there is an opportunity for marketers to use creative to really own the living room. And the reason why you want to own the living room is because two screens are better than one. And while you are consuming content as you're watching a program, and there's an advertisement here, post-COVID, we all got comfortable with scanning QR codes. A few years ago, you wouldn't be able to drive that same action from your Android or iPhone. And then on your phone, you're able to have a different opportunity for engagement with the brand, which can even drive purchase. So what I recommend, and what I think is really important for all of us in this room to consider, is that as we're thinking about where people spend their time, and while 2023 is really the year where mobile takes over all of traditional media, we have to figure out that regardless of how content is created or how our workflows are automated, how do we bring this to all parts of the marketing funnel? So the thing that we found through our extensive research, and as we have been working with clients directly on their social as well as open web executions, is that there are different considerations and different adaptations of this creative strategy, which drives 10x lift in brand awareness when creative is a primary component, 12 times the purchase intent, and 45% in sales lift. So all of these campaigns that we brought together are fixated on how to tell the brand story with creative. And when we have done these similar tests using standard assets, we see the complete opposite of these results. So I think a key takeaway from this session is that, it's really about elevating our verification strategies as an industry. So while brand safety and viewability are really, really important, what's going to be more important is that as content is created by AI and such, we have to make sure that things are fact-based. But then more importantly, we need to make sure that we're looking at things like dwell time, the ad clutter on the page, VCR, share of page, et cetera. And then other things that can really bring these environments together is making sure that if we are in this automated or programmatic ecosystem where we thrive automation, is making sure that you're working with experts in the industry on attention and creating curated high attention marketplaces. And then some other things that I think are critical to the success is making sure that you're looking at audience categories and developing strategies across verticals. And then lastly, the thing that I will say, and the way to end this, is that it will be okay for us to embrace AI to drive campaign efficiencies and for creative testing. But the reality is, creative is going to be king regardless of how publishers generate content, how users interact with that content. And so it's imperative that all of us do creative testing at scale. And with that, I want to thank everyone for coming to this presentation and hoping you all learned something today.